All right, hello everyone. We are learning Perek Dalet, chapter 4 of Shemuel Bet, and it is called the Assassination of Ishbashet. Again, I apologize for those of you who don't like spoilers. That's what happens in this chapter. All right, we're going to have a look at what happened. Because at the end of last chapter, we saw that Avner was killed. Yoav and got his revenge for killing his brother Asael, and David cursed him but did not kill him. And an interesting point there that David cursed but did not kill. And as I told you in the notes which I sent out last week, if you actually look what happened, the rabbinic tradition is that David did wrong by Yoav by cursing him. And in fact, all the curses which David gave to Yoav actually befell David's progeny, not some of his, in his descendants, not necessarily his own children, but in descendants that were punished with those curses which David had intended on Yoav. Anyway, we're going to jump in here and see what happens. It says, Vayishma ben Shaul ki met Avner bechevron, vayipu yadav v'chol Yisrael nivhalu. And Shaul's son heard that Avner had died in Hebron, and his hands became weak or feeble, and all of Israel were dismayed. And I always like the translation that dismayed. I mean, it's a rather the understatement of the world. They were upset, shocked, didn't know what to do with themselves. But a few thoughts on this. You'll see that in this chapter, Ishbashet is not called Ishbashet. He's called Ben Shaul here. He's called Ben Shaul there. What does that tell you? Where he keeps on being called Ben Shaul is trying to tell you something here that he's not really significant. Often when we call someone by the son of their father, it's especially in the Talmud, but also in Tanakh, it's to show disrespect or contempt for the person. But also here, it's telling you this person is insignificant. The only reason why they could have any significance is because of their father. So Ishbashet heard that Avner had been killed in Hebron. And that's an important piece. It doesn't say that he heard that Yoav killed him. It doesn't even say that Yoav killed him in revenge. It says he was killed in Hebron. What does that tell you? He has no idea why he was killed. Was he killed on David's orders? Was he killed because of Yoav? Some blood feud there? But if it was because of David, then he's worried. And that's an important point here to understand. The significance of the text, that he heard that Avner was killed in Hebron. Vayipu yadav. Okay, his hands became weak. V'chol Yisrael nivhalu, and all of Israel were dismayed. Let's go to the commentaries. And here's a better translation, by the way. They weren't dismayed, they panicked. The Abarbanel says as follows. Exactly what I was just hinting at. They had no way of knowing whether David had a hand in Avner's murder. They could only assume the worst. If David was blameless, why had he not punished Yoav and Avishai? Although Avner had rebelled against him, Ishbashet felt he could rely on his former commander's piety, that he would not obliterate the house of Shaul entirely. He was certain that Avner's treaty with David would provide protection for him. When they heard that Avner had been murdered, the assumption was that attempts at a settlement had failed, and so Yoav and Abishai, perhaps even with David's compliance, took his life. And this is why they panicked. Okay, there was no security. There was no sense of knowing what's going to be like, what's going to happen to us. At first, Ishboshet's like, you know what? All right, I'm not going to be king, but at least I'm not going to be killed. Now, who's going to save me? And you're telling me that David isn't going to hurt me. You know, why didn't David kill Yoav and Avishai? I mean, again, that's an important piece. This whole thing of the cursing, we learned at the end of last week, why didn't he do it? He was pragmatic. He said, I'll curse them, but I still need them because I'm too weak not to have generals of that caliber in my army. But to Ishboshet, it's sending him the opposite message. It's sending him a message that, you know what? Perhaps I'm pretty happy that I didn't order it, but I'm happy that Yoav and Avishai killed Avner. And, you know, I'm going to have them in my army. And so therefore, that explains why everyone is very worried, panicked, dismayed, and they're all weak. They don't know what to do with what's happening. Pasuk Bet. Ushnei anashim sarei gidudim hayu ben Shaul. And Shaul's son had two men, the heads of troops. Shem ha'echad Ba'ana, one of them was called Ba'ana, v'shem ha'sheni Rechav, and the second one was called Rechav, B'nei Rimon, the sons of Rimon, ha'be'eroti, the Be'erotite, mi B'nei Binyamin, from the tribe of Binyamin, ki gam Be'erot techashev al Binyamin, for Be'erot was also counted to Binyamin. Vayivrechu ha'be'erotim Gitaima, Vayusham Garim ad hayom hazeh. And the Be'erotites fled to Gitaim, and they were living there until this day. And now these two psukim here, Bet and Gimel, are a little confusing and trying to understand when were these generals, these captains of the guard, when were they parts of Ishboshet's, you know, army or staff, chief? When were they chief of staff or chiefs of staff? When were they part of it? And when did they run away to Gitaim? And what's happening here? And what's this until this day? Let's have a look at the commentaries. The Radak says, the heads of the troops, Scripture explains to us how Ba'ana and Rechav were able to kill Ishboshet. It's almost like these verses 2 and 3, and also probably Pasuk Daled as well, 2 to 4, they're more in parentheses. They're kind of like giving you a backstory to tell you how it was that Ishboshet was assassinated. How does the Radak explain it? They were captains of the guard. They were trusted for their loyalty. They were also from the tribe of Binyamin. That's Ishboshet's tribe. And therefore, there was no reason to think they would rise up against him. Now, Menachem ben Saruk was a very old commentary. Rashi often quotes him. Here the Radak does. And he says, don't read it as Hayu, they were, rather as Hava, destruction. The two men who were heads of legions destroyed Shaul's son. That's what it means. And how did they do it? By subterfuge. Because they were trusted, they were able to destroy Shaul's descendant. The Be'erotites had fled to Gitaim, as in Pasuk Gimel. Rashi says they fled there at the time of when Shaul was killed, and the Pelishtim overran the neighboring Israelite cities. Says the Mamloez, here's another possibility, that they fled after Avner's death because they no longer felt secure in Be'erot. Rather than clashing with Yoav and Avishai, they settled in Gitaim. Or they fled even earlier than this, intending to join Avner when he went over to David's forces. After hearing that he had been killed, they plotted to take Ishboshet's life. So it's a whole trying to understand, when were these people Were they lifelong Shaulites who were part of Binyamin, and they were always part of the guard? They were there with his father, with Shaul, and then they were trusted men in Ishboshet's army or his household, and they killed him on a whim? Or had they fled much earlier? So according to one position, they were with Shaul's army, but when Shaul was killed, that's when they ran away, like everyone else. Alternatively, they were trusted until the point where Avner was killed. When Avner was killed, that's when they said to themselves, it makes no sense to be part of Ishbashet. We're going to cut our losses, literally, cut off the head of our former ruler. And that's what's going to be the change. It's just an interesting perspective here of when we understand, are these people traitors deep and down? Are they opportunists? Or you know what? They were with Shaul, but they weren't with Ishbashet. Rob's asking an interesting question. Are these Beerotites part of the Gibeonites who deceived Yehoshua? I don't think so, because they're called B'nai Binyamin. Because they are, Ba'anav Rechav, B'nai Rimon, of B'nai Binyamin, I think that I don't think they're Gibeonites. But they could be acting and behaving in a similar way, where they're deceiving and mistreating people through falsehood. Now, what does it mean, Ad Hayom Hazeh, until this day? The Metzudat David says, this day that they killed Ishboshet, which means from the time where they fled, could have been as much as 5 years. From the time, or 7.5 years, if you want to go from the time that David took back up his kingdom. But when it could have been a maximum 7.5 years from the time that Shaul is killed until they killed Ishboshet, or it could be just 5 years. Again, that counting we talked about. Or it could be they were with Ishboshet that entire time, and only right at the end did they betray him. Or it could have been just a little bit more beforehand when Avner was killed. Now, we have this pasuk. I talked to you about Bet and Gimel being in parentheses. Pasuk Daled in a lot of the Mikrot Gedolot actually put this one in parentheses, or at least the translations do, because it seems, as we say, extra baggage. It's giving you a piece of text which on first glance doesn't seem to belong here, but we're going to explain why it's here. It says, V'lihonatan ben Shaul, and Yonatan, the son of Shaul, ben Necher Raglayim. He had a son who was lame on his feet. And it explains how he became lame. Ben Chamesh Shanim Haya, he was 5 years old, before Shemuel Shaul, when they came with the news about Shaul, Vihonatan, and Yonatan, me Yisrael, from Yisrael, that they had been killed. Vatisayu Omanto, and his nurse carried him. Vatanos, and she fled. Vayhi bechovza lanus, and in her haste to flee, Vayipol, he fell. Vayifpaseach, and he became lame. Ushmo Mephibosheth, and his name was Mephibosheth. What's all that doing here? Radak says, since Mephibosheth was lame, Scripture is pointing out that there was no one left in Shaul's family who is capable or fit to be king. Ma'am Loez says, also, Mephibosheth would be in no position to seek revenge on Rechav and Ba'ana for killing his uncle. Okay, so not only is he not fit to be king, he's not even in a position to carry out any form of reprisals of revenge. There's not going to be no blood feud here. There's no Yoav or Avishai coming to take revenge on Avner for killing Asael. No one's going to take revenge on Ishboshet, because the only surviving male is not physically able to do so. Now, we're going to jump in and really try and understand the text here on who is killed and how is it done. This is Pesukim Hey through Zion. We're going to read the three together. Vayelchu b'nei Rimon habe'eroti, Rechev u'Ba'ana. So these guys, Rechav and Ba'ana, the sons of Rimon the Be'erotite, came. Vayavo'u, and they came, Kachom Hayom, at the heat of the day, El Beit Ishbashet, to the house of Ishbashet, V'hu shochev et mishkav hatzahoraim, and he was sleeping during the midday rest. He's taking a rest, he's sleeping during the hottest part of the day. And by the way, just so it's important, we talk about in Mishnah and Pirkei Avot that sleeping during the day is no good thing, especially in the morning. But here also, he's having a siesta. As a king, I want you to understand this. He's a 40-year-old male, okay? 1 year older than I am. He's not 70 or 80. Okay, he's a head of state. What is he doing? He's sleeping. Okay, it's not the type of thing that you're doing, but it's also telling you that Rechav and Ba'ana, they knew very well the comings and goings and the behavior of Ishbashet. They knew, what does Ishbashet do on a hot summer's day? He goes to sleep. Okay, you know, at 2 o'clock, the siesta is up. He's having his midday rest. You can go and take him. Now, Pasuk Vav, Vehena ba'u atoch habayit, and they came inside the house, lokchei chitim. And the translation here you have is, they came inside the house as buyers of wheat. And we're going to see there's different interpretations actually what this whole phrase means. But we'll take it that one as first, at first blush. Vayakuhu, and they struck him, El HaChomesh, on the fifth rib, and we've now learned this, that this is the classic way to kill your enemy. You strike them in the fifth rib. So we had Avner killed Asael, Yoav killed Avner, through the fifth rib, and now you got Rechav and Ba'ana who are killing Ishbashet in the fifth rib. So that's just a very important thing to notice there. So what happened? So they struck him, Niblatu, and then they escaped. All right. Then it says in Pasuk Zayin, Vayavo abayit, they came to the house. And he was lying on his bed, bachadar mishkavo, in his bedroom, vayakuhu, and they struck him, vaymituhu, and they killed him, vayasiru at rosho, and they removed his head, vayitchu at rosho, and they took his head, vayelchu, and they went, derech ha'arava, by the way of the arava, by the way of the plain, kol halayla, all night long. And you're reading the text and you're thinking to yourself, what's just happened here? Isn't Pasuk Zayin a repeating of Pasuk Vav or a rendering of Pasuk Vav? I want to see that again. Pasuk Vav. They came dressed up as wheat traders. They struck him in the fifth rib and they ran away. Then Pasuk Zayin. What does it say? They came to the house. He was sleeping. They struck him, they killed him, they cut his head off, they took his head, and they ran away. What is Pasuk Zayin doing? What's happening here? Are we talking about multiple deaths here? Is it telling me that I tuned out between Pasuk Vav and Zayin? What's happening here? I mean, again, I have problems. Unless I'm giving the shir, sometimes I can tune out. But what is happening? What's the repeat? So we have a look here in the text. It says as follows. Wheat traders, how did they get in unnoticed? The text is coming to ask us, what did they do? How did these guys get in the first place? So we saw the Radak, they got in because they are the trusted generals of, one of his answers are the trusted chiefs of staff. But most of the people understand it, that they were no longer the chief of staff. So how did they get in? They knew his moves. How did they get in? So Rashi says they went in together with the wheat traders. So at a time when it was busy, they went in. Whereas the Mitzudat, David said they went dressed up as wheat traders. Okay, so you can have your own different interpretation. The Ma'am Loez now wants to get into this whole thing of Pasuk Vav and Zayin and what's happening here. The simple reading of the text implies that Rechab and Ba'ana waited for the right moment and chose to enter the house at a time when wheat traders arrived to sell their produce. Then, while the members of the household were preoccupied, the two men entered Ishboshet's bedroom and killed him while he was sleeping, and they were able to escape without anyone taking note. Alternatively, the Be'erot brothers entered together with a group of locals, not to sell wheat, but to buy wheat from Ishboshet's warehouses. They found the manager in charge of wheat, who brought them to the warehouses close to Ishboshet's quarters. While the manager was weighing the wheat, they killed who? The manager of the wheat, and smote him in the Chomesh, and he died. After that, they entered Ishboshet's house, found him sleeping, they killed and beheaded him. The members of the household, being preoccupied with the murder of the manager, did not know anything about Ishboshet's murder till much, much later. So you see how it's understood here. Here, it's giving you an explanation. Pasuk Vav is dealing with the killing of the wheat manager. That was like the, surprise or the distraction. Pay attention to this so we can go in and kill Ishboshet in Pasuk Zayin. Okay? The Radak says, the verse teaches us that they returned to the house to bring to David Ishboshet's head. It's almost like they got so carried away in Pasuk Vav killing Ishboshet, they said, wait a minute, we better bring proof. So they ran back in, cut his head off, and went back out. Or it's almost like, we killed him, but we're not sure we killed him. Let's go and double check. So they went in, struck him again. All right, he's dead. Let's cut his head off and make sure. And again, I hope no one's having their lunch while they're learning with us. But you can see here, it's a little bit how we're understanding it there, that either there's two people separately being killed, and that's Mam Loez. It's the wheat manager. He's in charge of selling wheat. They kill him. And then while everyone's distracted with that, they kill Ishboshet. Or you can go with the Radak they killed Ishboshet, and then they wanted to go back and double check what was really, that they'd really done it properly. Rubisa.
Well, I'm just wondering, right? I enjoy books where you go like, oh, it actually went down this path or that path, right? And I wonder, the Mamnoaz, what it's coming to explain, does it change our story? Is it just an explanation of the text? If we have the whole wheat supervisor being killed, does it change our whole experience, or does it just help us understand that pasuk?
I don't think it changes it doesn't change the narrative, because the whole point is their main goal is to kill Ishboshet. It's really telling you this is how they did it. So it's not, you're right, it's not one of those, I completely misunderstood what was going on there. No, their main target was Ishboshet. It's just telling you that this is a possible mechanism of how they did it. You're right. But still, nonetheless, what the Mamloez, and again, I don't do the Mamloez justice here. He gives 5 or 6 opinions. I'm just trying to give you, because remember, it's a Yalkut, and a Yalkut is it's an anthology. He gathers together 4 or 5 different positions on virtually every pasuk, and he's just trying to weave them in, and some of them are completely contradictory. A and E, answers 1 and 5 are completely different to each other. In fact, they can't even jive in the same place. That's always very interesting when you read the Mamloes. You've got to understand, he's not giving you one interpretation which is consistent along the page. He's giving you different answers, and those different answers are not always jiving together. But I try to give you enough of the more interesting ones to help us with the text. Now, the last 5 psukim are going to be what happens when they come to David. Now, unsurprisingly, because we know the text and we know David and we know how he feels about regicide, we know that David's not going to be happy. So the obvious question that we're going to have for ourselves is, what were they thinking? Which is, come on, don't you know what's going to happen here? Don't you know how this story ends? What were they thinking? Okay, one thing, they assassinated him. What were they thinking? Going to David to get a reward. So we're going to try and address that. And then we're going to reinvest ourselves in this whole discussion about, does David really care, or is he the greatest politician who ever lived? And obviously, there is probably gam v'gam in that. Also and also, elu ve'elu. But let's have a look. Vayaviu et Rosh Ishbashet el David. They brought the head of Ishbashet to David in Hebron. Vayomeru, and they said el Hamelech to the king, Hinei Rosh Ishbashet ben Shaul oivecha. Behold, here is the head of Ishbashet, the son of Shaul, your enemy. Asher bikesh et nafshecha, that you requested. He requested your life. Vayiten Hashem ladoni Hamelech. Nekamot hayom hazeh mishaul umizar'o. And God has granted my Lord the king vengeance this day of Shaul and of his descendants. Vayan David et Rechav et Ba'ana, and David answered Rechav and Ba'ana, Achiv, his brother, B'nai Rimon haBe'eroti, and he said to them, Chai Hashem, as God lives, Asher padat nafshi mikol tzara, who delivered my person from every distress. Okay, you know what? I'm thankful that I survived all my difficulties under Shaul, but never in my whole life did I deserve, beg, promise, ask, pray for God to do anything to Shaul, nor did I want anyone to do it for me. Yud, ki hamagid li lemo hinei met Shaul, v'hu haya kemevaseh be'einav, va'ochaza bo va'ahergehu betziklag, asher lititi lo besora. That he who told me, saying, behold, Shaul is dead, and he was in his own eyes as a herald of good tidings, I took hold of him and slew him in Siklag, who had expressed me to give him a reward for good tidings. You know what? What are you doing? Don't you understand? Don't you understand? That Amalekite who killed Shaul, Shaul was already dead or close to it. And he was following orders, and I killed him. What are you doing? Af ki anashim risha'im hargu et ish tzaddik beveito amishkavo, v'ato halo abakesh et damo miyadchem, uvi'arti etchem min haaretz. How much more when wicked men have slain an innocent man in his own house, in his own bed? And now should I not hold you accountable for his blood and remove you from the earth? What's David doing? Akal v'chomer. If Shaul, who was already going to die or was already close to death, and he was in battle, and the Amalekite is just following orders and killing him, and I killed the Amalekite, how much more so do you two cowards, wicked men, who killed a man while he was sleeping in his bed, do you guys deserve death? Yud Bet, Vaitzav David et hane'arim, and David commanded the youths, Vayahagum, and they killed them. Vaikatzetsu et yedehem, and they cut off their hands, vet raglehem, and their feet. Vaitlu al berecha, and they hanged them up beside the pool bechevron, in Chevron. Verosh Ishbashet lakachu, and they took the head of Ishbashet. Vaikberu bekeve avner bechevron, and they buried him. They buried the head in the cave, in the grave of Avner in Hebron. Now, as I said, we've got to understand a few things here. Number one, what were these guys thinking? Number two, why does David do something so gruesome of cutting off the hands and feet and hanging them up there? Why is he doing that? So we're going to have a look. First question first. What were they thinking? Ma'am Loez. It's very surprising that they thought David would be pleased that they murdered Ishbashet. Everyone knew how David reacted when the Amalekite youth informed him of Shaul's death. However, Rechav and Ba'anah thought there was no parallel. Why? He wasn't an Amalekite, and that was why he was killed. They were captains of the guard. David would want to have them in his army, just like David had done for Yoav and Avishai. Shaul was God's anointed, but Ishbashet was appointed by Avner. He gives here three reasons why they thought they were different. Number one, who was the first person killed? Amaleki. And an Amalekite deserves to die because he is Ben Amalek, and we have to kill them. Number two, David had just shown mercy by only cursing Yoav and Avishai. So therefore, perhaps just as Yoav and Avishai were only cursed, perhaps they would get away with a curse, and they would also become part of David's fighting force. And thirdly, why did David care so much about Shaul? Because he was God's anointed. Ishbashet wasn't anointed by God or by Shemuel. He was anointed by Avner. And so therefore, that's why it would be okay. But how wrong they were. What was the justification for killing Rechav and Ba'anah? Says the Abarbanel, the Amalekite who had killed Shaul had only done so because he was following Shaul's orders. And Shaul was already mortally wounded. Yet he was considered guilty of murder. How much more so were they deserving of the death penalty? Also, Shemuel had prophesied that Shaul would die in battle. So if you want to say, you know what, here's why the Amalekite should have been not killed. It's because, he was following orders. Shaul was going to die anyway. Shemuel had prophesied he was going to die. All those things. Whereas here, none of those things count, and therefore David was right to do what he did. Now, why were they mutilated? Why were their bodies mutilated? Says the Malbim, mutilation of the corpses and exhibition of their hands and feet are not in accordance with the Torah law. But David did so under his powers of Horat Malchut, of royal edict. He was able to act. Okay? A king can supersede the laws of Torah in order to teach everyone a lesson. The Radak, David did this to put beyond doubt that he was involved in the royal assassination. Now think again about what we talked about last week. What is Rav David Kimchi telling us here? He's telling us David wants to show everyone that he's the innocent party. Therefore, even if he is privately not dismayed by this news, he wants to let everyone know that he is innocent so that they will not hold him accountable. And finally, we have the Ma'am Loez. David's punished them, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. For killing Ishbashet, they were killed. For raising their hand against the monarchy, he cut off their hands. For walking or going to do evil, he cut off their feet. For cutting off Ishbashet's head, a form of hanging, he hung them over the pool. All this to publicize that such would be the fate of anyone who dared to raise up against the anointed of God. And again, we have this at the end of the Mamloes. What's his point here? David wants to show its self-preservation. If I punish anyone who does regicide, what am I telling them? Don't do regicide. Don't think it's easy to knock off the king. We don't like this. Why? Because I'm going to be king. I don't want anyone knocking me off. And therefore, when I do this publicly, I'm telling everyone I'm whiter than white. Now, do I think that David felt bad for Ishbashet? Probably. But what's his main motivation? I believe his main motivation is David is a politician. And David knew in order to have a kingdom, I need to set up a secure kingdom. Therefore, I'm going to publicly punish those people who do wrong, even if it does well for me. And number two, no, that's probably just it. I'm just going to publicly punish those who do it. And that's it. And any thoughts that maybe he felt bad, they're secondary. The primary point here is I want a safe kingdom. When I go on to be king over all Israel, when I move my throne to Israel, when I want to build the Beit HaMikdash, which he's not allowed to do, but when he wants that, all of it is having secure borders. He needs to have secure from domestic threats and also secure from any foreign attacks by neighboring countries. But he's trying to heal the country, but he's not healing it purely because he loves everyone. He's healing it because he's a politician and he wants to make sense. So here's a very important message for us as a takeaway. David HaMelech never ever took revenge on Shaul, not on Avner, not on Ishbashet, none of them. None of his enemies did he ever take personal vengeance over. But he certainly manipulated the situations well. And when we have our leaders and they tell us now's a time for peace, now's a time for everyone coming together, it's very nice, it's very noble. But it's also understand that they're trying to create their own dynasty, their own position as well. So I'm just saying it's one point there till we see that both things exist. Number one, they want to establish their own sensitivity and safety and security, but there's also here, and there is that piece though, that they're also, sad, but it's mainly to create that and create that image that I am above and beyond the pettiness of all of that. And now have cleared the way so that next week we're able to have David become full king over all Israel because everyone has been, killed off. Are there any questions?
This is a really epic story. I mean, this would be an entire season of Game of Thrones, right? So there are four men that have a claim to Saul's throne. There's Avner, who has an excellent claim because he's a blood relation by I think he's a cousin or an uncle, but he's older and he's a man of rank, and David gets rid of him without even getting his hands bloody. There's the Ishboseth, who is the son. He probably has the strongest claim, and David gets rid of him too, with having clean hands. And then there's the grandson that has the lame foot, who's the son of Jonathan. He's not eligible because of his physical disfigurement. So David gets rid of him also without having to do anything at all. And so David, who has the weakest claim to Saul's throne, is able to take the throne without any of the without having any blood on his hand, without any evil doing, without anything backhanded, and he's able to ascend and claim the throne without any baggage going in.
Absolutely, Robin. This is the perfect thing. It's not enough for David to come to the throne under a cloud. He wants to come to the throne as the undisputed number one person to be king over Israel. And that's how he unites the people. If he comes under a cloud, he's only an assassination attempt away from death. And so therefore, he wants to come in clear. And that's why he makes all these public declarations to make it out that he is totally guiltless. And that's why he leads every single thing, especially all the public demonstrations. And now he's ready to be king, exactly. It's very Game of Thrones, it's very Machiavellian, it's very Godfather-esque, although we could say all those three, they're all very Shemuel Bet-esque. And there you have it, friends. That's our chapter for today.